Hi, welcome to Heal Body, Mind and Spirit. My name is Dermot Farrell and today we're going to talk about redefining personal limits, doing the impossible. The prelude to this video is another video I did a few days ago about Kevin Levrone, who is a famous bodybuilder who was retired for 13 years and made a comeback to the premier bodybuilding competition, the Mr Olympia competition, this year in 2016. Now, if you take a look at the other video, it talks in depth about what happened and how impressive it was that he came back, and also that he didn't really place well because of injuries and so on and so forth, but it's still amazing how he came back. So that's kind of the prelude which got me thinking about this video, which is, what is the impossible? Is there a limit? Is there something we can say that you can go thus far and no further, or can we redefine these limits and go further? So, can we define the possible or the impossible? I believe that there are objective and subjective possibilities. Objectively, there's certain things we can achieve and certain things we can't. Everybody cannot run a 4-minute mile. Everybody cannot become an astronaut or a brain surgeon. By and large, we can do a lot more than we realize, and it begins with believing that you can do better, and then it requires action and steps to do better. You have to, if you want to do the seemingly impossible, not the actual impossible, if you want to do the seemingly impossible, you must redefine your limits. Let's take a look at redefining your personal limits. The world is full of people who try and tell us that we cannot do this and we cannot do that. Yet some people manage to achieve the seemingly impossible. Another amazing example this year was the American swimmer Michael Phelps, who won 5 gold medals at the 2016 Rio Olympics. Now, Michael Phelps has won a ton of gold medals, but interestingly this year he did it after a 2-year layoff. He retired in 2012, came back in 2014, was suffering from a substance abuse problem, so even when he came back he had a shaky start. Being at such a high level of sport, taking a break, effectively retiring and coming back again, is again a demonstration of the power of the mind to achieve something. And this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about the mind and the power of the mind to achieve certain things, because everything begins with what you think and what you believe. You must at least think that the possibility is there, and then you have to believe. So if we take Kevin Levrone, for example, we take Michael Phelps, these guys, even though a lot of people criticized them and said they couldn't come back to greatness, they came back to some degree. I mean, Kevin Levrone is still trying to make a comeback, but 5 gold medals in the Olympics, Michael Phelps, is an amazing achievement. But then again, the achievement of Kevin Levrone is that he's in his 50s. It just shows you what you can do. These people are achieving greatness, so why are we not achieving greatness? We can achieve greatness, but we have to begin by believing that we can achieve greatness. How about redefining personal limits in relationships? Let's get a little mundane for a minute. What defines a relationship, say between a husband and a wife, for instance? If the relationship is good, is there a limit to its goodness? Can a bad relationship become a good one? And if so, to what degree? The answer to these questions will always be subjective, but the point is that they are largely defined by the belief systems of the two people in question. If they feel that it's impossible to love each other to a greater extent, they will only love to this degree. Yet if they believe that they can get more out of their relationship, they will get more out of their relationship. We tend to limit ourselves as human beings to a rather low range of activity, and sadly the world in which we live in is set up to cater for mediocrity. Everything in our everyday life points towards maintenance of the normal, sustaining the everyday equilibrium of just about getting by. We can read some great self-help books, and at the end of it be amazed by the people who wrote these books and how inspiring they are, But then, how come our life sucks so much? Why are we so bored? Why are our relationships with our significant other not so great? Why is our relationship with our children only okayish? Why haven't we spoken to our brothers and sisters for months, and how come we're always a little bit broke and everything seems to be a struggle? There is no one single answer to this question, but I do believe that when we see an athlete excelling, for example, not just excelling because they've got genetic talent and they're young, but rather because they have stopped listening to all the naysayers, this is a great source of genuine inspiration rather than a bunch of hype that you might read in a lot of self-help books. There are several things missing from self-help books, and one of them is willingness to do the impossible, to redefine our personal limitations. While many of these books present a good overall concept, they forget to mention to the reader just how hard it can be to stand up there on your own and just go for it. But this is what is required to make a singular success out of anything. Regardless what business you're in, or sport, or artistic endeavor, there are always lots of talented people out there who are potential competitors. So to beat them, you have to stop fitting in. You have to step up and step out and gain your independence. But in our society, whenever your head pops up in the crowd, someone will always be there to give you well-intentioned advice and remind you, politely at first, that you will be better off keeping your head down and getting on with things. While they might be well-intentioned, however, their idea of you fitting in kills your ability to self-express. If you want to be different, if you want to be a success, you have to stick your head out now and again. What about redefining the limits of societal evolution? From the perspective of societal evolution, as a human race, someone has to be the first at something every now and again. For a society to grow and develop, someone has to create something new or do something which hasn't been done yet. Otherwise, as a species, we stop growing and developing. Now, this isn't necessarily all about money. It could be an artistic endeavor or a lifestyle choice. But the point is that for any change to occur in our society, some person has to do something different and be willing to take some flack in the process. As a species, in order to progress, we have to have trendsetters who go beyond the possible and redefine the limits. The 1969 space mission to the moon, for example, was deemed impossible, and yet it was done. How? Because the mission team believed. It is this unerring self-belief and willingness to let go of dated perceptions which paves the way to a better humanity. For example, back in the 18th and 19th centuries, it was normal and acceptable to have slavery in many countries. While slavery is still a problem in some regions, generally speaking, it's a dated concept. Another concept, of course, is empire. The world populace no longer likes the idea of great world powers which are always at each other's throats. Also, invading other countries and pilfering their asses and treating the locals like dogs is now seen as politically unacceptable. There is no question here that on the level of slavery and colonization, the world has certainly evolved. Can we evolve beyond war and manipulation of poor countries by wealthy ones? Well, we'll have to see, but certainly the seeds of hope are there. The only way that the world can become a great place is by some people believing in the possibility and then making efforts to ignore the possible, instead of willingness to redefine limits and create new realities. Basically, if we continue as we are, the world will be as it is. If you really want to have that beautiful world you like, then we have to start believing, seeing it as a possibility mentally, and we have to start believing in it emotionally. Redefining personal limitations, personal success. On a personal life, if your life sucks, then it's possible to change. But in order to do so, there must be a willingness to do the impossible and to redefine one's limitations. For example, unless there's a possibility of a happy relationship between you and your partner, the reality can never exist. Without the belief that you can have a good career, once again, it isn't likely to come along. Of course, some people are lucky with jobs and others not, but generally speaking, some level of self-belief is required. Doing the impossible isn't about biting off more than you can chew. Rather, it's about working towards something which for now may seem impossible. But if you get a little closer each day, eventually it becomes a possibility. For example, say a person is a great singer and wants to become famous. Well, this may appear impossible, but the possibility can take place once they think that it's possible and once they believe that it's possible, and then work over time towards this goal, little by little, pursuing smaller goals which feel doable, like maybe taking singing lessons or doing competitions, and then working towards the presently impossible goal of becoming a professional famous singer. So you have the vision of what you want to become, and you make small practical steps. So you work your way bit by bit to get there. Everything begins with the mind, and to achieve greatness, whether it is sport or career or relationships or lifestyle, you have to be a little bit bloody-minded and be willing to pave your own path in life. So if you really want something, you have to believe in it and follow it, even if a lot of other people don't think you can. But remember, society is based upon people thinking that you can't achieve something. But some people do achieve something, and they do it because they believe in it. No belief and no action, no change. As long as you toe the line, you'll just be another minion in the great scheme of things. While the popular media likes to depict great success in life as if they were either purely accidental or totally inevitable, given the genius of the famous person in question. We must be willing to push ourselves out there. In reality, these so-called financial, sporting, or artistic geniuses are normal people who have pushed themselves out there and done well for themselves. We have to be willing to do the same, and if you want the extra recognition which goes along with these great achievements, then we have to make great efforts in order to make that change in our life. Redefining personal limits, learning from failure. Another aspect of the Kevin Levrone story which I liked is his emphasis on learning from failure. For strictly speaking, he failed to make a big dent in the 2016 Mr Olympia contest. Yet he has been undeterred and intends to compete again. This would be silly if he was talentless, but actually plenty of talent is there. I don't know if Kevin Levrone will have the external success which he so craves, and ultimately nobody who dares to do the impossible can guarantee anything, as they are pushing the limits. But he is a self-made man, and it is his willingness to see, believe, and act accordingly which is determining his future. We've got famous examples of failures. For example, the famous Scott of the Antarctic, where their whole expedition to the Antarctic was a mess and a lot of people died. But there is a certain willingness, and this is where it gets interesting, because in our society, our politically correct society, we tend to feel that we can achieve something, but we don't really have to take risk. And the reality is that if you want to do the impossible, you have to push. You have to push very hard. And that's what it takes. The other day I was watching a conference with Elon Musk, the famous creator of SpaceX, and his desire to send people into Mars, which might be a little bit crazy, but anyway. He made an interesting point. He says that if you want to go to Mars, you should be willing to die, which sounds like an extreme point, but he says he has got a point. It's revolutionary technology. The first few hundred or few thousand people who go to Mars, whether with SpaceX or any other group, will be facing the possibility of, a high possibility of death because of so many unseen technical issues perhaps and difficulty fixing things in space or Mars. So that's an example of doing the impossible. You want to go to the moon, you risk maybe dying. You want to go to Mars, you risk dying. As far as I remember, the latest statistics on astronauts is that 1 in 50 astronauts will die. Although there's been very few tragedies in space, there's also been very few astronauts, so it's actually a pretty big percentage. So if you want to do something amazing, I'm not saying you should be frivolous or stupid or do something really dangerous, but I am saying that you have to put yourself out there, and that's something that's not popular these days, but that's what's required. And this is what we can learn from failure, because the only real failure is when you give up. If you fall on your face, as it were, you can always pull yourself back up and have another go and learn from the experience. So that's the important thing, is not doing foolish things like walking to the Antarctic on your own, or skydiving off the side of a steep mountain, for example, which is gambling with your life. No, I'm talking about doing something that's a calculated risk and be willing to get it wrong and to be willing to learn from it, but never really giving up on the dream, getting back on the horse again and having another go. How about personal limitations? Well, personal limitations are actually almost unlimited. We've talked earlier about external objective and internal subjective. For example, if you want to win a gold medal in the Olympics, there's only one person can win in each competition. If you want to, whatever sporting activity, only one person can be a winner in any one competition. In business life, only so many people can be billionaires or very, very rich people. Even an artist and musicians, there's a huge amount of competition to get there. Look how many top musicians and singers there are. At any one time, there's a few, and they last a few years, and then they're replaced by another few people. But subjective things, what do I mean by subjective? I mean things which are just personal to you, like your relationship with your wife or husband, with your brothers and sisters, with your friends, with your kids, feeling at peace with yourself, that sort of thing. That's subjective, and you're not competing with somebody, okay? So if we say, for example, that maybe in America there's 50 million married couples, just making that figure up and just saying, well, strictly speaking, they could all be happy. If we take 7 billion people in the world, 7 billion people could technically be happy. Now, you might say that's ridiculous. I'm not talking about probability here. I'm just talking about possibility. So, you know, if the couple next door to me are extremely happy with each other, that does not limit my relationship. There's no competition. In most things in life, objective things in life, there's always competition. There's always a chart. There's always a top 50, top 10, number 1, okay, Hall of Fame, etc. But subjectively, my relationship with my wife, my kids, etc., is limitless. There's no limit to how much, you know, a husband can love his wife, or a wife love her husband, or boyfriend or girlfriend, or friends, or whatever. There's no limit to that love or that bond. We can always go deeper, because in subjective things there are no limits. So what I've said so far in this video is that, you know, we can achieve the impossible in many cases, but to do so begins with mentally thinking there's a possibility, and then emotionally feeling and believing in that possibility, and then taking steps towards it while continually redefining what you believe you could do. Continually realizing you can do more, you can do more, you can do more. Now, objectively, there are some limits to this. But subjectively, there is no limits. You can love more and more deeply. You know, a husband and wife who are married 50 years, if they're up to it and open to each other rather than getting hung up about each other's failings, they can still be discovering each other. You can still be discovering yourself. Famously, Carl Gustav Jung, the famous psychotherapist, was quoted as saying, it would take 300 years for a human being to reach you know, full maturity. I don't know if that's true or hearsay or whatever, but the point is there's no limit to learning about yourself, learning about other people, or feeling close to somebody. So really, when we're talking about personal limitations, what I'd like to maybe give you to take away from this video is obviously, you know, you can achieve a lot more in life than you think you can. Your career can be better, your sporting life can be better, your lifestyle can be better. You can make big changes in your life. It begins with thinking I can do it, followed by believing I can do it, and then taking small actions in that direction. But most importantly is you can have better relationships, and you can have more peace of mind, and there is no limit to that. Okay? The limit to human happiness, the limit to human knowledge, is all down to what you believe is possible. We talk about how this present era is radically different from 100 years ago because of this discovery and that discovery, but the reality is the belief. Until somebody believed there could be a light bulb, there couldn't be a light bulb. Until somebody believed there could be electricity, there couldn't be electricity. If we're talking about human relationships, unless somebody believed that there's a deep inner meaning to life, and a life explored and examined as worthy of interest, there will be no psychotherapy, unless there was a belief that I can improve my life, there'd be no self-development. So just think about that. Whatever you can dream of can become a reality if you redefine your limits. And at times, certainly subjectively at least, and objectively sometimes, at times you do the impossible.